Welcome to this Executive Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the metaphorical lore of an entity named Asterion, and we're going to use it to master one of the absolute hardest things to get right: the delicate balance between operational efficiency and human empathy. Look, if you're a modern leader, a manager, or a team director, you already know the drill. Trying to keep an organization running like a well-oiled machine while actually caring for your people, yeah, it can absolutely feel like walking a tightrope. So today, we're going to act as your consultants. We'll use this really fascinating piece of fiction lore to teach you how to lead with what the source text calls balanced living holiness.
Okay, let's jump right in. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're translating this angelic lore into a highly practical toolkit for your daily leadership. We're going to cover the dangers of perfect order, the trap of the platinum crown, and how you can build an interwoven leadership model that actually fosters safe dissent and service-led management. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The lure of perfect order and the very real danger of exactness. So in our source lore, Asterion is this angelic figure who essentially acted like the ultimate chief operating officer. He saved worlds using flawless metrics. But there was a catch. He became completely obsessed with measurement and absolute exactness, and he forgot one vital truth. The text says, he loved balance so fiercely that he forgot the wounded are uneven. This is such a brilliant illustration. When we as leaders hyper-focus on our spreadsheets, our KPIs, our perfectly balanced quarterly projections, we run a massive risk. We forget that human beings are fundamentally uneven. Right? They carry invisible burdens, they have bad days, they make clumsy mistakes, and honestly, they need grace.
To enforce his incredibly rigid vision, Asterion created something called the Edict of Unbroken Pattern. This was a flawlessly sequenced system that left absolutely zero room for human reality. Every single function, every task had to follow one perfect sequence forever, without any variation whatsoever. I mean, doesn't that sound exactly like some corporate expense reporting software you've had to use? Asterion assumed the safest path must always be the most righteous. But the text warns us that a flawless wall can still block the sunrise. When you build a corporate policy that leaves no room for context, you aren't building a safe harbor for your team. You're building a cage.
Moving on to Section 2, the Platinum Crown. Let's talk about what actually happens when perfect order becomes an idol. You see, the ultimate manifestation of this extreme efficiency isn't some dark, chaotic monster. It's a pristine, symmetrical shadow called the Platinum Crown. When order is praised without mercy, without wisdom, or without freedom, it forms this crown. And it is a spectacular metaphor for modern corporate bureaucracy. Think about it. It speaks calmly, it sounds efficient, responsible, and frankly completely tired of the messy grief of human error, but ultimately it crushes those underneath it. The source makes a really profound point here. Isolated order is just as destructive as total chaos.
I'd love for you to reflect on your own Platinum Crown tendencies for a moment. Ask yourself, where does your team's procedure completely override the well-being of your people? As a consultant, this is literally one of the first discussion prompts I would drop on your executive team's desk. Are there rules in your organization right now that everyone follows just because, well, that's the rule, even when it actively harms your team's mental health or productivity?
Because here's the fallout. As the Angelic Second Vault warned in our story, victims who are crushed by order without wisdom become secretly resentful. And the scary part is, they don't always rebel loudly. Sometimes they just quietly check out, what we call quiet quitting today, turning your quest for total safety into a massive organizational risk. Law without wisdom just becomes a locked room full of correct answers where nobody actually wants to work. Your perfectly safe rules might be the exact thing driving your absolute best talent out the door.
Okay, Section 3, the interwoven leadership model. Let's talk about the shift to a much healthier framework.
we absolutely have to contrast Asterion's rigid edict with something called the Covenant of Interwoven Virtues. Now, the edict relies on rigid compliance, silent dissent, and top-down control. It's rigid. The Covenant, on the other hand, relies on adaptable frameworks, collaborative problem-solving, and servant leadership. Under the Covenant, no single facet of an organization rules without being balanced by another. Order is necessary, of course it is, but it's never permitted to stand alone without companions like mercy, wisdom, and freedom.
Let's make this actionable with a practical worksheet template you can use to map your standard operations directly to empathy-driven virtues. Think of it in 3 columns. In the first column, you list your team task or policy, say HR and compliance. In our lore, that's your 6th watch, always looking for errors. But in the middle column, you pair it with an empathy-driven virtue, like the 9th lantern, which exists to guide the weak. The living application in that 3rd column is the result. Suddenly you have HR policies that don't just blindly punish, but provide a real path for improvement and grace. Or take productivity, the 3rd wheel. Pair it with the 8th cry, which represents space for grief. What's the result? You get a productivity schedule that actively accommodates employees going through personal hardships rather than penalizing them just for being human.
Which brings us to Section 4, transforming command into service, and why authority actually must bow.
Listen, changing policies is only half the battle. Changing your posture as a leader is where the real transformation happens. Let's look at the lore of Damriel of the 4th Dominion. When he was faced with the temptation of absolute control, he literally removed his crown and laid down his sword. He said, "Authority that cannot bow is already infected." Wow. He realized that dominion is only holy when it protects what it could command. If you're governing simply because you hold a higher title, you've already become that rigid, heavy crown.
And this brings us to a really beautiful definition of service-led leadership. Governing not because you are higher, but because the weak require shelter and guidance. By intentionally opening small gates in our rigid corporate walls for wanderers, for those who stumble, make mistakes, and need room to learn, we transform isolated authority into actual service-led leadership. You aren't there to dominate your team. You are there to clear the path for them, to shelter them from the chaos of the market, and to guide them to success.
Section 5, fostering safe, honest dissent, and the crucial practice of listening to the 8th cry.
Here's a hard truth. A perfectly quiet team is rarely a healthy team. You can identify when your team policies have become rigid barriers to individual growth by looking out for 3 key signs. First, look for a culture of forced harmony. Do people just nod and agree in meetings? Second, notice when people check the sky before speaking, meaning they look around nervously to see if it's actually safe to share an honest opinion. And third, pay attention when nightmares, the real, messy, systemic problems in the business, are considered way too disorderly to even discuss. This perfectly mirrors the city of Halim from our source text. Halim was a city so overly governed and so peaceful that its citizens actually forgot how to breathe and completely lost their courage.
The entity known as the 8th cry teaches us a powerful lesson here. Not every raised voice is a rebellion. Some are just wounds asking to be found. A silence that cannot hold grief is not peace. Honest speech, even when it's uncomfortable or clumsy or downright angry, is absolutely essential. It prevents darkness and deep resentment from hiding beneath a veneer of polite compliance. As a leader, you literally have to welcome the uncomfortable feedback.
So here is a step-by-step collaborative exercise you can run with your team today to safely surface that dissent and rewrite the policies that have morphed into cages. Step 1, identify a policy causing friction. Just put it up on the whiteboard. Step 2, ask the room completely honestly, does this policy heal and help us, or does it merely control us?
Step 3, listen to the eighth cry of the team. Let them vent. Let them explain exactly how the policy impacts their day-to-day lives without any fear of retribution. And step 4, rewrite the policy together to interweave mercy and flexibility right into the structure.
And finally, Section 6, your guide to living holiness in daily management.
We've talked a lot about some pretty high-level concepts today, but how does this actually look on a Tuesday morning when the pressure is on and deadlines are looming? Well, as modern leaders, you have to implement these interwoven virtues into your daily management tasks. It is a continuous, dynamic balancing act. Whenever a company law becomes cold, let mercy question and warm it. But conversely, if you're being too lenient and your mercy becomes careless, let wisdom step in to shape it. If your team's freedom is drifting toward missed deadlines and chaos, let order steady it. And whenever order tightens toward fear and micromanagement, let love and trust open it back up.
The holiest order is not rigid. It breathes with the life it protects. This is what the source text calls celestial maturity. It's the mechanism that ensures your organization doesn't try to fight the chaos of the market by becoming an unfeeling bureaucratic machine. Instead, your team remains alive, compassionate, deeply resilient, and highly adaptable to absolutely whatever comes their way.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought for your own leadership journey. Look closely at the systems you've built. Really look at them. Is your order a lamp carried by mercy, lighting the way for your team to succeed? Or is it just a cage disguised as perfect efficiency, slowly draining the life out of your absolute best people? That choice is entirely yours. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to take these frameworks back to your teams this week